Our film starts at the saddest birthday party ever where some guy's at a strip club by himself. And it's a pretty cheap one, furnished with folding chairs with banners and balloons from Party City. The guy talks about how lucky he is to be at the sad strip club, but then the women fang out and attack him.
I sure am thirsty.
Next, we see that we're at Irvine State College in present day, which seems odd considering nothing from the previous scene says we were not in present day. Anyway, two guys have a conversation about how dumb math is before us seeing that the first scene literally happened the same week as its front page news in the guy's newspaper, negating the need to tell us it's present day. Gray Shirt Guy's response to the guy dying was deciding his place is now available for rent, so he calls the landlord on a payphone and gets the details. Him and his buddy now have to find a third roommate. After a montage of them doing housework, the dark-haired guy Ken bends over and finds a flyer for a place called Fetish Jam. Blonde guy Sammy was like, "Yay boobs," and Ken out of nowhere wonders if that place had to do with the guy's death. They then leave to meet their new roommate. They meet a dorky guy named Martin, who's from Mobile, Alabama, but mispronounces it as mobile, so I don't trust him. He also seems to be doing a bad Forrest Gump impression with his voice, but they accept him anyway. Next we get a guy in a duster watching the strippers walk in. He says he's going to give his brother payback. That night, he comes back, loads his revolver, and heads in. When the guy walks in, the dark-haired woman magically appears and approaches him. We learn her name is Treasure, and he introduces himself as Bob. The guy chewing his gum like a cow is kind of obnoxious, so hoping he doesn't last long. Anyway, Treasure gives him a lap dance with the camera annoyingly centering around his gum chewing until he pulls out his gun and instead of using it goes into a very long spiel about how long he's wanted to kill them. Apparently this dude has let 300 plus people die over 10 years just watching them waiting for his chance for a lap dance. Anyway, another dancer named Monique shows up and they jump him. He fights them off, but again, just points his gun without doing anything. That's when the blonde Serena comes from behind and they feed on him happily for me erasing him from the movie. Treasure then tells the other two to make sure no one followed him. Back with the guys, they're watching Vampire Sisters. Martin asks if they have more nudie movies and they question why he's a virgin. Then Ken gets a call from his girlfriend Jessica and they have a conversation that has no bearing on the plot other than letting us know she exists, but we do find out Ken wants to break up with her but is afraid to tell her. I'm banking on this never actually getting addressed later. Anyway, Ken and Sammy decide that they want to join a frat, but to do it they need to record themselves doing something wild, so they decide that going to Fetish Jam and I guess bringing the girls back and making a sex tape would do it. They get Martin involved by promising him he'd see naked girls. The guys eventually arrive to the, again, super empty strip club and Treasure approaches them. Again, lesson to anyone watching this, if you go to a strip club and no one's there, walk away. Anyway, she tells them to wait while she goes back to the other girls who are still cleaning up from Bob and tells them to get ready. They get excited and fang out. This leads to a scene of the girls dancing before Treasure decides to go flirt with Ken. They do have a fun conversation where Treasure literally tells them the place just opened, then asks them if this is their first time there. Martin also asks Serena if she wants to go watch video games. I think this movie might have been written by an alien. Anyway, they do go back with the guys to their place. We then see Ken and Treasure go back to his room to get it on with weird green lighting, followed by your stereotypical vampire fanging out but trying to hold back from feeding on the guy she's screwing scene. I guess they're attempting a love story. Again, I'm banking on this also not being addressed later. Anyway, when he wakes up the next morning, she's gone but leaves him a note. Ken then goes to Martin and tells him that he's in love with Treasure. Later, Ken convinces the other two that they should go back to Fetish Jam. Apparently they forgot that plot point because when we see them later, Ken calls them over to their place. After a montage of them getting ready, the girls finally arrive and apparently Serena forgot about not being interested in Martin from the night before because all the women now pair up. Maybe it's the generic rock music they turn on that hypnotizes them. They all laugh at Martin's drinking inability, which goes on for a while before Monique and Sammy take off for his room. Serena asks Ken for shots, and when he says no, she fangs out, but I guess he's supposed to be so drunk that he thinks he's hallucinating. After a Sammy and Monique sex scene, Serena basically molests Martin, who has thankfully dropped the Forrest Gump accent at this point. He takes her back to his room, or maybe she takes him. Either way, she mounts him. We then see the other two head to a room where they watch the two from a camera they have set up. Instead of getting some, though, Serena fangs out and feeds on him. Despite his screams, his friends kind of sit there pretty confused. By the time they realize maybe they should get up, it's too late and he's dead. Back at the club, the girls report back to Treasure. Treasure says they have to deal with the guys tonight, but then a drunk guy shows up. Monique basically cusses the guy out, but when he doesn't go away, she takes him outside and feeds on him in an alley. As she's doing it, the guys drive by. They try to run Monique down, but she eludes them. She then tells Treasure. Back at the house, they put a sheet over Martin's body and don't know how they will explain it to the police, even though they recorded the whole thing. Then Martin's body disintegrates. They then go have a How to Kill Vampires cramming session. The guys head back to the club. Treasure pretends to be afraid of Ken's cross, but then laughs it off. Serena and Monique double team Sammy, and the guys take off. The guys then argue in the car how vampires work. When they get back home, they ask Jeeves, or whatever the main search engine was at the time, about the club, and uncover that the entire plot up to that point was just on the internet, including the vampire hunter getting killed there. They then get some research via a book written by Gum-Chewing Bob, where they find out that the strippers are a new breed of vampire that can only be killed via their eyes. At the club, Treasure tells Serena to kill Sammy and bring Ken back alive. Anyway, Jessica calls Ken, and they argue for reasons, so I'll give them credit for almost addressing that plot. After the conversation, Ken says he's not sure if he'll be able to kill Treasure because he's in love with her. They then hear a sound upstairs, and when they get there, it's Serena, looking like a demon. She attacks Ken, but Sammy gets her in the eye and she disintegrates into mist. Sammy wants to go back to them, but Ken intelligently says they should wait for the vampires to come to them. They then set some Home Alone-style traps. She peers through smoke at their place and avoids all the easily visible traps, heads to Sammy's room, and drives the stake he was holding through his heart. Meanwhile, in Ken's room, Treasure appears and they once again get it on. This time, he gets angry because he gets scratched or something like that, so he tells the vampire lady who is killing all his friends to leave and then walks out himself. See, dumb stuff like that happens without post-nut clarity. He walks into Sammy's room and then remembers, oh yeah, murder, when he sees Sammy's body. He then heads to the door where Jessica is there, wanting to work things out. He tries to explain the whole vampire thing, but she doesn't believe him, so he shows her Sammy's body. She then gets the full plot recap. Jessica then gets on board because of, jealousy. Ken and Jessica arrive at the club, and despite the previous scene of him telling her how hard it is to kill them, basically kills Monique in one blow with no issues. They then head inside where Treasure confronts them. Treasure wants to turn Ken, but he turns it down. In the scuffle, Jessica gets bitten but not killed, and Treasure begins strangling Ken. Jessica gets up, gets a one-liner in, and gets Treasure in the eye. After some way too overdramatic moaning followed by some makeup transformation, Treasure dies and Ken and Jessica make up. Back at their place, we see Ken writing a story about the vampires. Jessica says she has a surprise for Ken, which is lingerie. After looking at the bite mark on her neck, she goes back and mounts Ken. The film ends with us seeing red eyes looking at them from outside, as opposed to what should have happened, which was Jessica turning.